Hello, everyone. I am Dave Cupp. Welcome to another episode of Before the Court. Tonight, as usual, we will be reviewing a viral police video, discussing it with our panelists, and rendering for you a verdict, justified or unjustified. But tonight is going to be a very special episode because tonight, in addition to watching and reviewing the video of the shooting of AJ Crooms and Sincere Pierce, with which I'm sure a lot of our viewers are familiar, we're also going to watch a little snippet of a few words spoken by one of their aunts at a rally only shortly after their killing. And we're going to discuss with our experts tonight how her words reflect what's at play in our culture today. We're going to discuss tonight, and I'm excited about this, with our detective, our lawyer, and our author, the exact issue at play currently in our streets. What is happening between our communities and our police? Tonight, we are going to really get into it. If this is a topic that matters to you, if you're passionate about this, stick around and watch tonight. We're really going to get into the nitty-gritty and the meat of this. So stick around. Let's bring in our panel of experts. Experts, come on in here. Retired Detective Chief Joe Gandersky. We have author of the Blue Book, Aric Anderson. We have Defense Counsel Heather Waddell. Panelists, thank you so much for being back again. And I am excited to discuss this with you guys tonight. Before we get started, let's go ahead and watch the first section of video that was the short pursuit and then ultimately the shooting of AJ Crooms and Sincere Pierce. We'll come right back after that. We'll get into it, all right? Let's go ahead and roll the first part of the video.
Stop the vehicle! Stop the vehicle! Stop the vehicle! Stop! 1033. Stop the vehicle, goddammit! Stop! Stop! Shot fired! Shot fired!
Okay. All right, panel of experts. This is not a case without a great deal of attention. A lot of people have been paying attention to this case, and a lot of people want to understand what and how this happened. So, Aric, first of all, I have to give a shout out to you, Aric, and anybody watching. We're taping this on February 18th, and you currently have no water where you live in the land of frozen windmills, but thank you for being on the panel again today. And I want to ask you, what are your thoughts on this particular event?
You know, that all the videos that we've seen are they're pretty rough to see. My initial thoughts when I was looking at the video was I didn't see any police lights identifying themselves as maybe trying to pull someone over. They got out with guns drawn, shouting commands. The car that was in pursuit, their windows were up. Who knows if their music was on or anything? I don't know if they were heard, but at some point you got to see guns drawn on you. So I don't understand the car moving or trying to move out of the way. So I don't know. I'm a little confused.
All right, Joe, give me your take. What did you see?
If this video was a minute, 59 seconds was no justification to shoot anyone. But in the 1 second that the vehicle turned into that officer, I don't see what else he could have done. However, just to go back, in reading the accounts, supposedly there was weapons in the car. I don't know if that's true or not yet, because basically they're just preliminary accounts. There was a surviving young man in the car, and he gave a statement saying that they all could hear the commands. This is from the sheriff's office. The investigation continues by the state's attorney's office. what was going on inside the car relative to their conversation with the driver. The driver has taken control of the vehicle, okay? He's performing these maneuvers. What is on his mind? I don't understand what could have been on his mind for first to have him turn the vehicle towards the police officers instead of the other way down the street if he was going to try and get out of harm's way, if he was afraid or whatever. There's so many questions as to what was going on in the driver's mind. And the key to the only survivor that we know of that would probably know the sequence of events is the person that was in the car that could give us full statement. And I haven't seen it yet, or it hasn't been released as to what his statement was. But that goes back to another question as to how did the police get that information that the car was stolen? To initiate this entire incident where somewhere along the line, the police were told that this car is possibly stolen. And they see the car, they pull a stop. So there's so many questions, but the bottom line is this. Up until the point that the officers in front of the car, there was 3 weapons. If there was 2 in the car was the third.
Let me ask you something quick that I know I've heard other people ask. Why not shoot the tires?
Impossible. First of all, I couldn't see the tires from where he was. You mean when they first turned the vehicle? At what point is he going to shoot the tires? And that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stop the car.
Heather, what's your perspective? What did you think when you watched it?
I had a slightly different, first of all, I had exactly the thought that you said, why not shoot the tires? And not being one that often fires guns or doesn't have any training with firearms, I don't know the realistic, usage of a gun to be able to shoot at tires and stop a vehicle. So that was my initial instinct to say, why are you shooting through a windshield? Especially like Joe just said, you don't know where these bullets are going to go. You don't know maybe even how many occupants are in the vehicle. I couldn't see through. It looked like very tinted windows. My other instinct came in with my criminal defense brain that I started thinking, why are these officers immediately drawing their weapons until or unless they have information that the people inside the vehicle are armed and presently dangerous? So again, without knowing any other information, without hearing the call maybe that they got, if they had stolen vehicle, 4 occupants, armed and dangerous, considered armed, that's different. If they just have possibly stolen vehicle, you don't know if these people are armed. You don't need to come out guns a-blazing. That can all of a sudden accelerate something that doesn't need to be brought to that level right away. So something that maybe, like we said, maybe it was a stolen car, maybe it was a case of mistaken identity, maybe these kids thought they had permission, didn't really, who knows? All of a sudden they see a few cops, guns drawn, get the fuck out of the car, God damn it, this, get out, stop the car, and they're scared and they react. I think when guns are drawn right away, it has a tendency to escalate things more than they need to be. So I would agree with Joe that at a certain point you can defend yourself. And if there's a car coming at you, accelerating toward you, I don't know what else you're really supposed to do. Maybe they could have dived out of the way, but again, my first instinct, other than shoot out the tires first, was why are these guns drawn so quickly?
Aric, let me ask your opinion on something. Should police be obligated to try to dive out of the way, or should people be obligated not to drive a car at a state authority figure?
Both. I think, first, you can't drive a 2-ton vehicle at anyone. That's dangerous and could be construed as assault. I know some states can. I think if officers have been told that it's a stolen vehicle, they can immediately draw their weapons on whoever it is. I've seen that before already, where they put little 5-year-olds in handcuffs on the ground. but it's just strange that the car turned into the police as opposed to away from the police. But even as they turned into the police, they weren't speeding towards the police. They were maneuvering around the police. The one officer went around her car to avoid any kind of confrontation. The other officer pretty much stood his ground, but it looked like they were moving away from him. My question is always, first, why aren't they assessing the situation when they first pull over whoever they have? If they did think it was a stolen vehicle, I don't know why you would jump out and expose yourself, with, armed or unarmed. And then after they decided, I'm in danger, I need to fire into the car, how do they know there wasn't a hostage in the car or an infant? So I don't know. It seems a little reckless to me.
They did, in fact, shoot and kill someone who wasn't driving the car, who was a passenger.
Yeah.
So, Joe, I'm coming to you right now. In addition to what you want to add, I have a question for you too. Respond to the seemingly very sensible and logical questions and thoughts that both Heather and Aric just said, which is explain what is the reality of doing a felony stop on a suspected stolen car occupied ×3?
To answer that question, first of all, I think it's important to know that there's just not one police department in this country. There are thousands of police departments in this country, thousands of jurisdictions, all under the rules of essentially each state, governs the rules of police officer conduct. They're sworn in, they're officers of the state. So the idea of pulling the guns right away, I could say I worked for 3 years in Woodlawn, and I'd stop 10 cars a night. Never had my gun out. I'd be on the computer and the car would pop up hot. Never pull a gun out. But that is not, and so that's one part of it. So the weapon safety and weapon procedure is governed by maybe some policy within each department. But that's, again, Heather makes a great point about, could it have escalated fear? Sure, you're seeing guns out, but what do? You stop. You put your hands on the dash. You put your hands on the windshield. You can't. I've seen cars. As far as the other question, and certainly people that aren't familiar with guns and weapons, I've seen cars with driving down on rims at 80, 90, 100 miles an hour on the expressway with sparks. I've seen cars with tires on fire from the friction. The rubber gets on fire from the friction of driving it while the car is flat. Okay, so in answer to the officer, if you look at the tape carefully and look at the time sequence, if you slow it down, whatever, the officer didn't plan, I don't think he planned anything except it was a direct response to save his life or to save himself from getting injured. Seriously. I think it's a direct, impulsive response. If he wouldn't have had his gun out, he might have got run over. And so, you can go to hindsight on these things and talk about weapon safety and all this other stuff. It's all a factor, but the bottom line was, why did that young man turn that car into the officer? The officer was not standing in front of the car. He was not blocking that car. That car made a conscious effort to turn off the street into the officer. You look at the tape over and over again. So, in fact, he was so far off the street, he ended up hitting a house. So,
let me ask I want all of your opinions on something that Joe touched on a minute ago when he said there's not just one police department. Something has always struck me that if you look at the fire department, for example, Joe, you and I talked about this privately one day on the phone. If you look at a fire department and you're trained to be a firefighter. You can go most places in the country and jump on a rig and know basically the same firefighting techniques and for most part the same thing. But it doesn't work that way with the police at all. States have their own academies, and then certain departments differ from the states. And there is no real national federalized list of, police policies that applies everywhere. You think there's a pro in doing something like that, Aric?
I think there would be a pro. I mean, I think when we train our military, they're all trained one way, but they're briefed on wherever they're going to adapt to different cultures or different countrysides. I think if it were generalized to a certain point, it could work. But like Joe said, I mean, there's different laws for different states and different expectations for different states. So until that became equal or the same, I don't see that it's even possible for that to happen. And in an America where you can make your own laws and your own rules, I just don't foresee that happening.
Heather, what about something that was just like a national use of force policy standard?
So what I was just thinking is, obviously we do have different states and different states have different laws and regulations, but I think there could be a way to do that. Like you said, a generalized thing for, use of force policies, period. This is how you would react to this situation, period. These are, just basic human rights things, period. And then you can go toward, some kind of regulatory agency or regulatory exam, boards, something to make sure that people are all trained in their specific area, but also to make sure that they're all kind of on the same page, at least about certain things. I think that that's possible. It's possible with law.
Joe, where are we? What are we missing? Where are we wrong?
Well, there is something like that in law enforcement. There's an organization called CALEA, and what it does is it offers standards and training. Police departments can be CALEA certified as to a certain level of standards. A lot of smaller departments can do this and do it as a matter of pride and as a matter of moving towards professionalism. People don't. I think there's a general idea that police don't get a lot of training. I mean, the academy in Chicago Police Department, they get more training than required by the state. So what happens is the disconnect between, I mean, certainly police officers get trained in the Constitution. They get trained in criminal law in Illinois. They understand all the in code offenses and all the nuances in the law. But when it comes down to how things go down in the street on a day-to-day basis, where the rubber meets the road, these decisions are made, as we've seen in many of our scenarios, and that we will see in many of our scenarios, in a heartbeat of a moment. This is a perfect example.
You trying to jump in, Heather?
Yeah, just about the ability or capability, I guess, to do this. Did you say CALEA certification?
Yeah, it's CALEA. Yeah, it's a federal standards. The problem is that when large cities try to do it, it's too expensive. The training's too expensive, takes too much time. And now with the defund the police movement.
Is that the type of thing that the federal government could incentivize police departments to adhere to?
Well, the problem is the federal government's doing it through consent decrees when cities get the idea that they've got patterns and practices of discrimination, and they get slapped with consent decrees that cost the cities millions of dollars to comply with them. And Chicago has one. And so all of that money and training is essentially what CALEA would be anyway. I mean, it's forced training and forced compliance by the court. And if the city doesn't comply, then the courts essentially take over the police department until the city does. And that's what's been going on in Chicago for several years now.
Heather, are you on the same page? Heather and Aric, both of you, are you guys on the same page with me, thinking that there's must be some kind of a way to incentivize a department to do that before it's forced on them legally because they got in trouble?
Yeah, that was my next question to be, why isn't this something that's just required, period? Like, if you want to be a lawyer, you have to take the bar and pass the bar exam. If you want to be a doctor, you have to take and pass boards. If you want to be a police officer, you should have to take and pass this program, the certified program that's available. It shouldn't be, you can only do it if you have the funds. That's ridiculous.
It is. Aric, jump in here.
I was going to say, part of that too is, we're talking about doctors and lawyers who have multiple years of education, where you can be on the streets with a gun with a high school diploma. So education, I think, is invaluable. And if a city did invest in that, maybe they wouldn't have to spend so many millions of dollars in restitution to people. And then I think about body cameras. Some cities use them, but they don't force their officers to turn them on. So I think there's a lot of standards that could be instituted that would help alleviate some of the issues that we have as far as shootings or deaths or whatever we see out there that is unjust.
Jump in, Joe.
Yeah, CALEA is I just looked it up. CALEA I remember, it's a private effort of accreditation by some major national law enforcement agencies, such as the Police Executive Research Forum, which is PERF, the Association of Chiefs of Police, NOBLE, which is the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, to set standards across the board for police departments. But again, it's not that the Chicago Police Department doesn't do it because it doesn't want to. Right now, they're the state of Illinois and law enforcement in the state of Illinois, to not digress, is fighting a huge battle over a bill that will destroy policing as we know it, and this is my opinion, as we know it in Illinois. And it's been labeled as police reform, and it will basically, relative to police officers, it will take things that they would be disciplined for, and they've criminalized them. And for instance, if a police officer doesn't put his body camera on, he could be, right now, he could be disciplined for it, okay? If he's supposed to have it on. Under this new law, he could be charged with a felony. So it's a 700-page sweeping thing. It's been passed already. If the governor doesn't veto it, it goes into law shortly, and you can just about forget about any kind of proactive policing in the state of Illinois. It'll be over.
Why shouldn't he be charged with a felony for that, is my question. I was just talking actually with somebody the other day about people who have to register, they have a case that maybe was 20 years ago, but they have to register, okay, either for a violent crime or for a sex crime. Mm-hmm. For failing to register, which doesn't necessarily mean they've run off or doing anything super nefarious, if they miss one reporting on exactly what apartment unit they're in or something, they can be charged with a felony failure to register.
Okay.
For not filling out a form correctly. Okay. So it's something that's required by law. If it's part of your police department that you have to wear a body cam and you're not turning yours on, why shouldn't you be charged with a crime for that?
Okay. What's the difference between being charged with an offense? There's a whole world of difference in this regard. If you can discipline, right now you can discipline an officer and he could be fired. If you charge him with a felony, you're charging him with a major criminal offense, which is a year or more in prison, okay, for not turning on a cam, whether it's intentional or and that officer will be fired. So take a new, I can give you a ton of situations. The officer's driving down the street, doesn't have his camera on. Somebody waves him down. Officer, I need help. Blah, blah, blah. That guy just robbed me. He didn't have his camera on. He gets charged with a felony? Under the way
No,
that
not
the law is
automatically, but I think it would have to be looked at to determine why in a certain, in any given situation, because aren't they supposed to always be running and then they turn them and they're back for 60 seconds?
It depends. There's a pre-start. There's a whole thing. Yeah. But what I'm saying is this is one of many things. Okay, and this is digressing from. But if you start charging police officers with felonies for things that they would normally be disciplined for in the past, think about what kind of police service you're going to get. Think about who you're going to get to be police officers. Think about who's going to want the job. Think about trying to get minorities to be on this job. It ain't going to happen.
Aric, jump in.
Yeah, Joe, I think you hit on a good point there, but I think it's discipline. I think right now we don't even know when an officer has been disciplined or why they were disciplined. And if an officer was fired, they go to the next county and get another job. So there's a lot of loopholes in there that need to be closed, in my opinion.
Yeah, fix that. Sure, I agree.
Yeah.
Fix that, but you don't charge. Felonies are for criminals. They're for hardened criminals. They're robbery, aggravated battery. Okay, you're basically calling police officers criminals for not taking a policy action. I mean, it's
Or for forgetting because something happened.
I mean, yeah, you got to look at it because it's got to be charged. It's got to be charged by a state's attorney, of course. He's going to have to. But think of what you're going to put police officers under relative to this whole body of this whole idea of culture, and you do have a way to find out what discipline is on a police officer and what the results are, and it's more transparent every day.
We digressed into body cameras, I think, because we were segueing from the fact that if a lot of departments don't even yet have the funding for body cameras, they are certainly not going to get the funding for CALEA certification. So that might be, I think, why we got into body cameras. Aric brought up there's departments that don't even have body cameras yet. So funding is actually a pretty big issue. I wonder if the notion to defund is in fact opposite of what we should be doing. Maybe there's more funding needed and it has to go to the right things. Heather?
I would agree with that. I think that people, when they say defund the police, have this kind of idea in their head. There's two different sides of it. Some people look at it rationally to say, like what you just said, we don't mean take away all of their funds and money. That's absurd. But to maybe reallocate it. We don't, for example, need like these small town police departments that have tanks, like military tanks. What are you doing with that? Why do you have that? Why do you have an arsenal of weapons? And, I don't know, if it was used toward doing these certifications, these certified, accredited programs to get kind of a national standard across the board, that would be great. If it was toward more training, more education, lawyers, doctors have to do it. Most professionals have to do like continuing blank education, continuing legal education, continuing psychological education. They have to do a certain amount of them every year, a certain amount of hours. And I think that would be very important for officers. Like I think Aric said it, that, a lot of them come out of high school and we give them a gun, it's here, I say that lightly. I know that there's training involved, but if there was a more uniform standard of training, and if we put more funds into education and training, I think that would be more helpful than putting more money into, which America does across the board, into like military, which some of our police departments, I feel like they've become militaries on a smaller scale, but they're armed to the teeth. And unless you're in kind of, I don't know, a big city with like Chicago, where we do have a lot of violent crime and we do have a lot of guns here, unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be like an equal footing on what the police have versus what civilians have at their disposal. So I think I say defund the police, I mean, put it in a different place, put it to better use than toward just giving them more weapons, giving them more cars, put it toward community outreach, maybe have people in the neighborhoods. I think Joe was saying it a few sessions ago. He used to know people in the neighborhood. I don't know that that's the case anymore. Even a few years ago, I think it was a little bit different, that you'd see in police reports, they would know some of the witnesses, or they would know one of the subjects. They would, call them, yeah, we knew this guy before, we got information out of him. He told us this. Recently, it's just been subject A, subject B. They don't know who they're talking to. They don't know who they're arresting. They don't know the neighborhoods. They don't know the aunt across the street. They don't know grandma up the block. They don't know anything that's going on in the area. And I think that maybe putting some funds toward community outreach, toward education, toward training would be better. So I wouldn't say defund the police entirely, but I understand the sentiment, I guess.
Aric, I'm coming to you right now, but I also have go ahead and then I'll ask you.
I just wanted to add to defund the police part. Yeah, it's really about reallocating money. It's not about getting rid of police departments. But in California, I come from a small town that's 6 square miles, and we have our own SWAT team. And you would think, why would we need a SWAT team? And we really don't. But our city touches 6 other cities, and we lend out our SWAT team to those cities, and it's a way to generate income for our little small city. So, I don't know why you would need a tank, but but there are ways to there's different ways to generate income as a small city.
Go ahead, Joe.
The idea of defunding the police was one of those hot button words that people designed after the George Floyd incidents and protests. And see, Heather made a really good point. In major cities now, over the last 15, 20 years, the police are at war. It's unfortunate because they go out on patrol every night to well-armed areas that are armed, more powerful weapons than the police have. When I first came on the job, it was Saturday night special occasionally here. Okay, I had my little 6-shooter, which was but we weren't outgunned or outmanned or outarmed. It's different now. It's different now. You can see it. You see it every day. Carjackings. Think about it. Think about what a carjacking is. People are driving down the street casually. They got a gun in their face. And the police, if you happen to carjack a copper, you might get shot. But it's going out into these patrols every night and not knowing what's going to happen when you turn the corner, what you're going to run into. And the homicides are through the roof. Robberies are through the roof. It's different now. So, I mean,
I would also add one thing. This is just my opinion. I would add that if your city is big enough that it has a school, it should have a SWAT team. Yeah. Because everybody can criticize the militarization of the police until somebody's shooting at your kids, and then everyone wants to know where are the snipers.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that Aric brought up is a good point. It's not just about money, where these small towns are weaponized with SWAT teams and stuff. They have what they do is they have mutual support agreements, mutual assist agreements between small cities. So they if something big happens, they don't have 3 guys working on the street. They can hit the panic button and call in 100 cars from different locations where they normally could never do that. It's important now because what happens? Things happen quickly and they happen in large scales now. And so it's a tough thing. But
let's get back to the video we were talking about. Yeah. We've digressed so much because there's so much to talk about. Aric, I know we haven't talked a lot about it. There's not a lot to the video. Give us the ultimate summary on just what we saw. What is your verdict here? on just the stop and and again, we don't know yet because the investigation's still going on. So we can all sit here and give our verdicts, but sometimes we talk about videos where it's already been decided legally, other times it hasn't. All we can do is do the best that we can from what we see and what we know. Lead us off, Aric.
Wow, thank you for that. We see officers pulling over a vehicle with no lights, jumping out of their cars, guns drawn. We see a car trying to pull away from the officers and then turn into the officers. At that point, I think an officer doesn't have much of a choice but to protect themselves. But again, I go back to assessing the situation, and did they assess the situation before they got out of their cars? Did they look around the neighborhoods well, I got to say this first. If you pull your gun, you're thinking you're going to use it. So that's number one. So as they pull their guns drawn, they know that they're going to use or they have the potential to use their guns. But as that car starts moving towards the officer, he starts firing into the car. And again, you don't know where those bullets are flying to. There's houses nearby, or there's a house right on the corner. And I just don't know if they made a sound decision to start with. As I researched this a little bit, I looked up a couple of videos about people that have stolen police cars and were they shot. And just the ones I pulled up, like 6 of them, where a citizen literally stole a police car. In one instance, the person crashes into, a ditch, runs at the officers with guns drawn, and they don't fire on them. So I don't know why they would have to shoot at this particular car and not have to shoot at others.
Heather, attack just this one video. Tell us where you lie on.
I go back to where I started, kind of. I don't believe that the guns needed to be drawn off the bat. It's a question that I get into on almost every cross-examination. If there's, an issue, if I'm doing a motion to quash and suppress, if they find something in a car that I don't believe they had the right to search, but they're trying, the officers are trying to say that they, did a pat down or did a search because they believed that the subject or suspect, whoever, was armed and dangerous. I ask them, did you draw your weapon? And if they say no, then it's contradictory already. You believed that somebody was armed and dangerous in this vehicle, but you didn't draw your weapon. You believed somebody had a gun in the car, but you didn't draw your weapon. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So sometimes it's the other way, that they say they did draw their weapon, but they had no evidence of anybody being armed and dangerous. And then it adds more ammo to my argument that it was, that somebody was being detained, that they didn't feel free to leave, etc. I think without any further information, again, I think Aric said it, there's no lights and siren that we can see to pull over this vehicle. I don't know how they ultimately did it, but the vehicle does seem to kind of pull over before sort of turning around. I also agree with, if you haven't assessed the situation, again, the windows are very tinted. You can't see how many occupants are in the vehicle. You don't know if maybe there is a hostage situation or if there are just other civilians who are not part of this, attempt to escape or attempt to steal this vehicle. Why are they getting out of their vehicles so quickly? There was another thing that briefly just in my mind, and I was very young when this happened, not to rub that in, but the O.J. Simpson thing. And I've seen, things recently and the American Crime Story and just things over the years. How long was that high-speed chase with O.J.? Nobody shot in the windows. Nobody shot in the car. And I think, wasn't there a part when they thought that maybe there were hostages, but it wasn't until like later, like they had already been driving around for how long, and nobody shot at this car.
Yeah, but nobody shot that car at a cop either.
Drove it toward a cop. Maybe, yeah, that's probably true. But it was a high-speed chase, and there were other people that were in, possible danger, and there are ways to disable cars. So
I'm just devil's advocate.
Yeah. I was very uncomfortable with the speed, the rapidity with which all of the officers were out of the vehicles, guns drawn. I think that they're with a little bit of maybe, again, just assessing the situation. What are we really dealing with here? Do we need to get out of the car? Do we need to draw our weapons? Should we stay in the car until we know what's going on? Put on one of those megaphones or whatever. Get out of the vehicle, and they can stay in at least the safety of protection of their own vehicle until they see, hands come out of the window or until the car is actually stopped. I thought it was very quick acceleration of what was going on. Again, though, when the car is driving toward you and it's acting erratically, and the only information you do have is maybe this car is stolen, maybe the occupants are dangerous, I don't know really what else you're supposed to do. And having never been in a situation where a car is driving at me, toward me, I don't know. I don't know that I would have shot into the windshield of a car that I didn't know who was occupying it or had any other information, but I don't know that I wouldn't have done that.
You've never had someone drive a car at you? You've never had any real fun friendships before. My buddies and I drive cars at each other because it's Tuesday. All right, Joe, you're number 3. Where do you lay?
Every stop is different. There's basic training that you could train officers to do. Every stop is different. Every officers make different decisions based on certain things that they see, that they hear, that they do. The bottom line of this one was, the officers could have blocked the car in the driveway. The officers could have done a million things, but the car turned the other way after they yelled for them to stop a zillion times. Okay, the car could have turned the other way, could have taken them on a chase. They can't shoot a car in a chase just because if there was a chase. There was no chase because the people who got shot didn't calmly pull into the driveway. But the bottom line was this: you do what you're trained to do in an emergency. It happens in war. It happens in police. What he was trained to do was protect his life. He had the means in his hand. Up until that car turned into him, I don't think he would have shot anybody, but we don't know that. But the car, in fact, did turn into him. He had no time to think about how many shots to fire, where to fire. He just started shooting because that's who he was trained. That's human instinct, and that's what he did.
Heather, let me ask you something. What if you were tasked with defending a police officer who shot somebody and you did not agree with it, but you asked the police officer, why did you do that? And he literally said, this is literally exactly what I was trained to do. I'm not saying that's what he would say in this case. I'm just asking you as a human being and as an attorney, where do you fall on that? What if you had to defend a police officer who claims that was exactly what his training was and it complies with Illinois law, and you don't agree with that?
It doesn't really matter if I agree with it. If it's the law and it's part of his training, I have taken him on as a client, I'm going to zealously represent him within the bounds of the law. I've had clients that I, don't really like. I think some of them are dirtbags. I have some that I think are great. Maybe they're drug dealers, but they're good guys. I just want to make sure people's rights are defended properly. So, you might be a drug dealer, but maybe the cops didn't get you right. Maybe they were doing a bad job and maybe they were doing things they weren't supposed to be doing. And maybe you learn your lesson, but if not, maybe they'll get you the right way the next time. So I say that too. I've had officers, ask me how I sleep at night, and I say very comfortably in a nice warm bed. Because
What's that?
In a nice warm bed. He said, is that a dig at Aric? But
poor Aric. I forgot you have no wattage. You're over there freezing.
Poor Texas.
Yeah, you do.
All right. Here's what
I like to add something.
Come on, bring it.
I think as a as a citizen, and as our basic rights are, you are innocent until proven guilty. And I think what we see in that video is you're guilty right from the get-go, right when they jump out of the car with their guns. So I think we've lost that in whatever training that officers have, is that you're assumed guilty and then maybe you're innocent later, but we're going to find something on you. So I think our basic rights are being assaulted.
Joe, reconcile that for me with police training and the tactics of encountering someone you have no idea who they are or what they're about to do.
Well, how many times?
How do we balance both of those?
Because what we do is you're trained to create an environment where you can be safe and the people who you're stopping can be safe if they comply with the rules. Okay. How many times have you been in a car and someone walking down the street knows who you can't see you, and you're waving at them because they can't see who's in the car because of a reflection or tinting or whatever it is. You don't know what's in these cars. You stop a van, it's got tinted windows all around. There could be 20 people in that car with shotguns waiting for you. The point is, you set yourself up. The training is meant to set yourself up so that you can create a safe situation for yourself, for the person, okay, as best as possible. They could have stayed in their car and waited for 10 other coppers to come by. I mean, would that have made a difference? I don't know. There's other videos that we've seen where it makes a difference. But again, it didn't happen. The bottom line is what happened, and you have to deal with the facts as presented.
I see a real problem right there in what you're both saying, because I see both of those. I get that, Aric. That seems right. To me, it seems like there's a real problem in not making someone feel like the police already think that they're a killer without even knowing them, versus the police who are doing a felony stop for potential stolen car, and who have seen virtually every video in existence of a police officer being killed on a traffic stop, and their training says it's a felony stop. Get out, seek cover and concealment behind your door, and you're prepared for an automatic shootout right off the bat. You have to be prepared for the worst. But okay, now how do we balance that with not making the people inside the car terrified that we're about to shoot them for no reason and that we think they're already killers?
Well, I think we've seen that
paradox.
Yeah, but we've seen, like I said, today I watched this video where there was a potential car theft versus an actual car theft of a police vehicle. And the potential car thieves were killed, and the actual car thieves of a police vehicle were not killed. So this is from the same state. So how they're, I think I don't know what the mindset of an officer is going in, but there
Let me suggest one thing. Let me suggest one thing. What you say is so interesting. It speaks to defining the moment of threat, in my opinion, because neither of the cases, in my opinion, show somebody being shot for stealing a car or believing to steal a car. In my opinion, one shows somebody using that car as a weapon and being shot, and someone else not using the stolen car as a weapon and not being shot. So it's my opinion that I don't see the shooting or the threat stemming from the theft of the car or the potential theft of the car, because you're very right. It turns out that car may not have been stolen. We're not really sure what happened with that car. It was in the system, but it wasn't stolen, but somebody loaned it to him. But when I watch the video, I see guns drawn on a potential vehicle theft but I don't see the shooting until the car is used as a weapon. Let me throw that out there. That was to you, Aric.
Yeah,
Come back.
I agree with you. The videos, the videos that I watched today were the police vehicles were stolen and then driven away through civilian traffic, which is just as dangerous, I think. And I've also seen where, I don't know, I've seen that almost the same type of theft with the car, and the thief drove at a police officer and shots weren't fired. So I just think there's a lot of inconsistency with when you shoot and even who you shoot at times.
I'm going to agree. I'm going to come to you right now, Joe. Let me just throw in a little. I'm going to agree with you on that. But I often have to tell myself, yeah, I see a lot of videos that demonstrate to me inconsistencies. And I see one cop in basically a situation choose to shoot, and I see another cop in basically the same situation choose not to shoot. I'm going to agree with you. I see that a lot. But I often have to remind myself of the context, the scope of what I'm looking at. Almost 1 million encounters a day nationwide. And I have to keep thinking to myself, yeah, and each individual cop can perceive a threat differently. I can't claim to know in each case why the discrepancies, but I agree with you that I see that. I don't know really what I'm seeing or why, but I agree with you that I see what you're seeing. There are videos that give me the impression that there are inconsistencies. Jump in, Heather.
Having seen videos, like Joe was saying, with these body-worn cameras, the amount of data that's being created right now, which it's all in the cloud, so it's, they have plenty of space up there wherever that is. But they'll
it's in my garage.
It's no. Is
it out in LA? They'll give us essentially a whole, not real. They used to come on discs, like on actual CDs, and we'd go through them that way. But it wouldn't be just the one stop that we were looking for. We'd have to sometimes look through a lot of different footage. And so you guys were just talking about inconsistency between different officers or different departments or whatever on these different videos. I've watched, thousands of videos where nothing happens. And there's even discrepancies between one single officer and how they react. And you start to kind of realize that they are making judgment calls based on a particular situation. There'll be 10 stops that they do in whatever day, and they don't touch their weapon at all. It'll be, just a traffic violation. They walk up, they do their thing, they get back in the car. They're like, okay, just hang tight. We'll go type. Okay, great. Here's your license back. Pay that ticket or don't, or whatever. We'll see in court or not, versus there'll be another one where maybe, it's not broad daylight. Maybe it's, 2 a.m. and they see a car swerving around, and the really dark tinted windows are speeding with dark tinted windows, goes through a stoplight. Or there's different situations where, especially if you have, patrolled a specific area for a long time, when something's not right, and when something might be more routine. But I'm getting a little lost here. I don't think it's fair to always just say like, oh, I just reacted based on my training. But I also think that we have to remember that these people also are people, and they are capable of making judgment calls based on their experience and training. They're not allowed to use hunches to have probable cause, but they can use things around them and, things that they see and have experienced in the past to kind of say, this isn't right, this is different, this is what I need to do in this situation versus I might not do it in this one. I can't see what's in this vehicle, it's dark out, and we got a call that this car might be stolen. I might draw my weapon. If it's something in the middle of the day, somebody just doesn't use a turn signal, I'm probably not going to. But again, I think that there's a discrepancy even between one person on how they can react to any different situation.
And also, and I'm coming to you right now, Joe, and also I think that there are a lot of very subtle behavioral cues that police are taught in their training to look for that a lot of other people don't look for. And I think that they use those on every stop to try to gauge what's the behavior they're about to encounter. Joe, go ahead.
Heather, yeah, and she's on the right line of thinking here. Traffic stops, first of all, are a different animal than street stops. Totally different animal, because you've got instant mobility, you've got a huge weapon, you've got hidden things going on that you can't see. But I also remember a few weeks ago, Heather mentioned that she was aware that, and I'm totally aware of it, and talking to the other, I lived it. There's situations where I could have shot somebody 2-3 times a month and just never did. And so did my cohorts, so did my peers. So, and Aric, you see that, it's, there's a difference because you can't program police to do the same thing. They're not robots. It's a sense of within them that's why it's so important to hire good people, because the law allows them this leeway. That's what we're saying. The state of any state in the country allows police officers to do this, to take a life, theoretically, okay? Not theoretically, in reality, under certain circumstances. There'd be dead bodies laying all over the place if they shot everybody that they were justified in shooting. I can tell you right now that I can't think of, under normal circumstances, pulling a gun out of my holster. And there's a big difference in pulling the gun out on a traffic stop for a stolen car. But I wouldn't criticize somebody that did it. It's the difference between having the gun, your hand on the gun, having it out of your holster, or having it pointed at someone. If you have it pointed at someone, you better be justified and ready to use it, okay? But I think that if you took, in this case, okay, if you took any citizen in the world and put a gun in his hand and had a car swerve into him, he would have shot the driver. He would have tried to shoot the driver, policeman or no. So it's just the circumstances.
Can I add something there?
Yeah, of course.
Boy, we've really gone off, I think, on this one.
Digression.
I agree with Joe on there's different situations, different circumstances, but I think there's also a mindset that I see with certain officers. And in this case, when I looked at a video of a neighbor who happened to be the neighbor that the car ended up in her lawn with officers trying to attend to the people that were shot. And those officers went into her house really uninvited, asked her for her ID, asked her if she rented or if she owned. I mean, these are questions to just a witness that I thought were inappropriate. And I think just spoke to the mindset of the police officers that were there.
Anyone?
I feel like that does go back to the mindset that everybody's bad, everybody's the criminal before they've even done anything wrong. Because if you label them as a criminal already, this is a criminal, this is a subject, a perp, then it creates, that's who they are, versus this is a person who has had maybe some circumstance or something that's happened that they've done, but it doesn't necessarily define who they are. And I think if people understand that, it can create a different response to how we react to people and how we treat people. Again, instead of coming out guns a-blazing to figure out another way to stop this car, to just instead of treating people like automatically, we know you've done something wrong, I'm judge, jury, and executioner now, let the system deal with it. I do my part, and then everybody else can do theirs.
But, and that's a good point, but I don't think most police officers think that way. Here's another issue, is that a lot of times victims or people that claim that they are victims will ramp up the danger aspect of a subject in order for the police to respond to them. In other words, my car is stolen. Well, I let him have the car, but he didn't bring it back in 3 days, and I'm pissed. Well, now he stole the car. Are you sure? He's a bad dude. He's got a big record. There may be some guns in the car, et cetera, et cetera. So they're the ones a lot of times that set the tone as far as how this is broadcast to the police. And unfortunately, that happens a lot. But any police officer that's working the street or any detective that focuses on an individual, and that's one of the things I learned right off the bat, and thinks that they're focused only on that person and that he's guilty of whatever was accused, is not going to be successful. And the fact is that he's going to be embarrassed and perhaps get into trouble. He's not going to solve a lot of cases. It's just not right. Again, police officers don't necessarily think that way, from my experience. They just go and do the job and try to sort it all out and want to go to the next one. Some of them have, when they start their duty, their computers are loaded with 10 jobs already. They're supposed to go from one to the next. So let's just sort this one out and head to the next one. Meantime, they see a car. This is, that's why it's different departments, different police officers in different parts of the country.
My panelists, you three are the absolute best. We couldn't even get through the first part of this show because the conversation is too good. So what we're going to do, since we've gone way too long, let's give a final verdict on this extremely unfortunate and ugly situation. And then when we reconvene again, we're going to look at the second part of the tape, and we will carry on so many more components of this entire conversation. It's riveting so far. Don't lose your train of thought. Keep it on you, and we'll reconvene and go over the second part of this tape next week. Okay?
Is it possible to answer after part 2?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
We can answer part 2, but right now we're going to do part 1 answer. Okay? We're looking at this simply at this one use of force. We can't incorporate everything else that we're talking about because we're trying to determine the fate of this one police officer. And if he was justified, then we can't say he's not. If he's not, then we can't say he is. Heather.
I've struggled with this. I think not justified.
Aric.
Yeah, I think it's a tough one. I think things were escalated too fast, but the car did turn towards the officers. I didn't think that the car was. I think the car was trying to avoid the officer, but it is still a moving vehicle and moving towards the officer. But man, I'm still going to say unjustified.
Joe.
Justified. I would die to have the investigative file to see what exactly to learn what the surviving person in that car said, and hopefully maybe by next time they'll have released the report and we'll see. I'd like to.
Do we expect to get or be allowed to have any? Well, once the investigation's complete, it'll certainly be public, won't it?
Yeah, they'll make a press conference, but
It should be.
There's a lot of questions. Tox reports. What were the guns doing in the car? But again, you could put anybody, take the badge off of that officer, put him in front of that car and have a car turn into him, and he's justified in shooting if he's got a gun.
All right. You know what, Aric, I love your idea. After next episode, when we've discussed all the full context, we can come back and revisit our answers and see how we all feel at that point, okay? Conversation is the entire point of this whole project. Thank you all panelists for being with us again this week. I can't wait to finish up next week. It's going to be so exciting. We didn't even get to. Anyway, you guys are too good. You jumped the whole shark for me. Thank you very much. You've ruined the whole show.
You're welcome.
Aric Anderson, Joe Ganderski, Heather Waddell. Thank you all so much. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Dave.
There we have it, folks. We do not have a unanimous decision tonight. Our detective ruled the shooting justified. Our attorney and our author ruled it unjustified, although they admit that there is a tough call in there. We did not make it to the second part of the show that we wanted to get to tonight, but we will next week. In fact, that will be part 2 of this episode. If you were enjoying the conversation tonight, please make sure you click the next link down or find the next video on the list make sure to watch part 2. We are going to explore something that Sincere Pierce's aunt says at a rally only days after their shooting. And we're going to discuss how her words reflect the exact problems facing our communities and our police departments today. So until next week, if you have questions or comments or concerns or even video ideas you want us to review, please get in touch with us at info@beforethecourttv.com. Until next week, I'm Dave Cupp. We'll see you next time on Before the Court.